The fluorescent lights of County General's blood donation center hummed softly as Claire Peterson rolled up the sleeve of her waitress uniform. The white blouse with red trim was still spotted with coffee, stains from the morning rush at Danny's diner. But she'd come straight from her shift when she saw the urgent appeal on the hospital's digital sign. Critical blood shortage, typo negative, desperately needed. She was tired, bone tired, the kind that came from working double shifts 6 days a week. But Claire had always believed in doing what you could, when you could. Her mother had taught her that before the cancer took her 3 years ago. "You're sure about this?" the nurse asked. A kind woman in her 50s named Margaret with gentle hands and knowing eyes. "You look exhausted, honey." "I'm sure," Claire said, settling back into the donation chair. "Someone needs it more than I need an extra hour of sleep." Margaret smiled and began the process, and Claire watched her blood flow through the tube into the collection bag. There was something humbling about it, seeing your own life force becoming someone else's hope. She thought about whoever would receive this blood, a stranger she'd never meet, whose life might hang in the balance. "You're a good person," Margaret said softly, adjusting the IV line. "We don't get many walk-ins anymore. Everyone's too busy." Claire shrugged. "My mom always said we're all connected, you know? That what we do for others, we do for ourselves somehow. I guess I still believe that." What Claire didn't know was that at that very moment, 2 floors above her, a man was dying. 42-year-old Jonathan Blake had been crossing the street to his office tower when a delivery truck ran a red light. The impact had been devastating. Now he lay unconscious in the ICU, machines breathing for him, his life measured in the steady beep of monitors, and he was bleeding internally. "We need O negative now!" Dr. Sarah Chen barked to the attending nurse. "He's lost too much blood. Without a transfusion in the next 20 minutes, we're going to lose him." The blood bank moved with practiced efficiency. The unit that Claire Peterson had just donated was typed, tested with emergency protocols, and rushed upstairs. Within 15 minutes of leaving her body, Claire's blood was flowing into Jonathan Blake's veins, buying him the time the surgical team needed to stop the internal bleeding. Claire knew none of this. She accepted her juice and cookies, rested the required 15 minutes, and then walked out into the afternoon sun. She had another shift starting at 4, and rent was due in 3 days. She couldn't afford to think about much beyond that. The surgery took 6 hours. Jonathan Blake survived, though he remained unconscious for 2 more days. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his younger sister Amanda sitting beside his bed, tears streaming down her face. "You're awake," she sobbed. "Oh God, John, you're awake. We thought we'd lost you." Over the next few days, as Jonathan slowly recovered, he learned the details of his accident and his surgery, and he learned about the blood transfusion that had saved his life, donated by someone who'd walked in off the street just when it was needed most. "Can you find out who it was?" he asked Dr. Chen during one of her rounds. "The donor. That's confidential, Mr. Blake. Privacy regulations." "I understand. But surely there's a way. I just want to thank them." Dr. Chen hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Let me see what I can do." 2 weeks later, Claire was in the middle of the lunch rush when a woman in an expensive business suit walked into Danny's diner. The woman looked distinctly out of place among the construction workers and truck drivers who made up their usual clientele. "Excuse me," the woman said, approaching Claire. "Are you Claire Peterson?" Claire wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly self-conscious. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Amanda Blake. May I sit down for a moment?" Something in the woman's tone made Claire nod, and she slid into a booth, gesturing for Amanda to join her. Her manager shot her a look, but Claire held up a finger. "Just 1 minute. Miss Peterson, 2 weeks ago you donated blood at County General." Claire's heart skipped. "Is something wrong? Was there a problem with—" No, nothing like that." Amanda's face softened. "Quite the opposite. Your blood saved my brother's life. He was in a terrible accident. And without your donation," she paused, emotion catching in her throat. "Without you, he wouldn't have survived the surgery." Claire felt the words wash over her, not quite real. I'm glad I could help. I didn't know it was urgent for a specific person. The sign just said there was a shortage." There was. "And you responded." Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. My brother would like to meet you to thank you in person, and he asked me to give you this. Claire opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $50,000. I can't accept this, she said immediately, trying to hand it back. I didn't donate blood for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I know. That's exactly why my brother wants you to have it. Please, Miss Peterson, Claire, at least come meet him. Let him thank you himself. Then, if you still want to return the money, that's your choice. Something in Amanda's eyes, a genuine warmth, a sisterly concern made Claire agree. They set a time for the following Sunday, Claire's only day off. The Blake estate was unlike anything Claire had ever seen. The house, mansion, really, sat on 5 acres of manicured grounds in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. As Amanda led her through marble hallways decorated with original artwork, Claire felt increasingly out of place in her best dress, which had cost $30 at a thrift store. Jonathan Blake was sitting in a sunroom overlooking a garden. He still looked pale, and there was a careful slowness to how he moved. But his eyes were alert and warm. He stood when Claire entered, wincing slightly. Please, sit down, Claire said quickly. You shouldn't be... I'm fine. Better than fine, thanks to you. He gestured to a chair across from him. Thank you for coming. I know this must all seem very strange. A bit, Claire admitted, perching on the edge of the chair. Can I get you anything? Tea, coffee, water? I'm okay, thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, and Claire realized Jonathan Blake seemed as nervous as she felt. Here was a man, she'd looked him up after Amanda's visit and knew he was a billionaire, that his company had revolutionized medical technology, who'd literally built an empire, and he seemed uncertain how to begin. I'm not good at this, he finally said. At being vulnerable, at admitting I needed help. I've spent my whole life being self-sufficient, building things, solving problems, and then a truck runs a red light and suddenly none of that matters. Suddenly I'm completely dependent on the kindness of a stranger. Claire heard something in his voice, not just gratitude, but a deeper realization, as if he were working through something profound. You didn't just save my life, Jonathan continued. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that we need each other. That success isn't measured in dollars or companies or achievements, but in the connections we make, the help we give, the humanity we show. Anyone would have done the same, Claire said softly. But they didn't, you did. On a day when you were exhausted from working a double shift, when you probably had 100 reasons to just go home. He leaned forward. Amanda told me you tried to return the check. I didn't donate blood for money, Mr. Blake. Jonathan, please, he smiled. And I know you didn't. That's precisely why I want you to keep it. But more than that, I want to make you a proposal. Claire's heart hammered. A proposal? I've been thinking a lot during my recovery. About my life, my company, what matters. I've built a medical technology empire, but I've lost touch with why I started, with the human side of medicine. I need someone to help me reconnect with that. Someone who understands that healthcare isn't just about technology and profit margins, but about people. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Claire. Inside was a job offer. Director of Patient Advocacy for Blake, Medical Technologies. The salary made her dizzy. I don't understand, she said. I'm a waitress. I don't have any qualifications for something like this. You have the most important qualification. You care about people more than yourself. You proved that when you donated blood despite being exhausted, expecting nothing in return. Jonathan's voice was earnest. I've made billions developing medical devices, but I've lost sight of the patients they're meant to serve. I need someone who hasn't, someone who can help me transform my company into something that truly prioritizes human welfare over profits. But I don't know anything about medical technology or corporate management. You can learn those things. What I can't teach, what I've forgotten and need to remember is compassion. Is thinking of others first. Is doing the right thing when no one's watching. He paused. Will you at least think about it? Claire looked down at the folder, at an offer that would change her entire life. She thought about her mother, about what she would say, and she heard her voice clearly. Take the leap, honey. Life rewards the brave. I'll think about it, she said. Over the next month, Claire met with Jonathan several times. They talked about his company, about his vision for changing it, about her ideas for patient advocacy programs. She was surprised to find that he listened, really listened, to her perspective. And slowly, she began to see that maybe she did have something valuable to offer. She also got to know the man behind the billionaire image. Jonathan told her about losing his parents young, about building his company as a way to prevent others from experiencing that loss, about how somewhere along the way, the mission had gotten lost in the success, and success had become the mission itself. "You've reminded me why I started this," he said during one of their meetings. "Not just with the blood donation, but with your perspective, your humanity. You've given me a second chance in more ways than one." 3 months after the accident, Claire Peterson started her new job. It wasn't easy, there was a steep learning curve. And not everyone at Blake Medical Technologies appreciated her input. But Jonathan supported her, and slowly, things began to change. Patient feedback programs were implemented. Profit margins were adjusted to make devices more affordable. Charity initiatives expanded. A year later, Claire stood beside Jonathan at the opening of the Blake Foundation Patient Advocacy Center, a program she'd designed to ensure that patient voices were heard in medical device development. "None of this would exist without you," Jonathan said as they watched patients and families touring the facility. "You didn't just save my life that day. You gave it new meaning." Claire smiled. "You did the same for me. I was stuck, just surviving. You helped me see I could do more, be more." "We helped each other," Jonathan corrected. "That's what your mother meant, wasn't it? That we're all connected. That what we do for others, we do for ourselves." 2 years after the accident, Jonathan Blake asked Claire Peterson to marry him. Not because she'd saved his life, though he'd never forget that gift, but because she'd shown him how to truly live it. Because she'd reminded him that the measure of a person wasn't in their bank account, but in their heart. Claire said yes. On their wedding day, as they exchanged vows in the same garden where they'd first talked, Jonathan looked at his bride and thought about that moment in the ICU when her blood had flowed into his veins, keeping his heart beating, buying him time. He'd been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance, and this remarkable woman had given it to him, expecting nothing in return. "I love you," he whispered as they danced their first dance. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me," Claire whispered back. Because that was the truth they'd both discovered. Saving someone, really saving them, wasn't just about blood transfusions or job offers or grand gestures. It was about seeing each other, truly seeing each other, and choosing connection over isolation, compassion over indifference, love over fear. The waitress had donated blood to an emergency patient. Unaware he was a billionaire, he'd returned with a proposal that changed both their lives. But the real gift wasn't the money or the job, or even the love that grew between them. The real gift was the reminder that we're all connected, that small acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we can't imagine, and that sometimes, when we give of ourselves expecting nothing in return, we receive everything we never knew we needed. Claire had given Jonathan her blood, and in return, he'd given her a life beyond anything she'd dreamed possible. But more importantly, they'd given each other hope. And in a world that often felt cold and disconnected, hope was the most precious gift of all.